Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar of the International Journal of Refugee Law, a leading peer-reviewed journal on all aspects of international law relating to forced migration. My name is Mello, and I'm one of the editorial board members of the IJRL and will moderate this session. Today, members of the editorial team, including IJRL's co-editor-in-chief, Professor Geoff Gilbert, editorial board member, Dr. Marina Sharpe, and the book review editor, Professor Kirsten McConnachie, will elaborate on the review and the editing process of the journal and offer tips and explanation on do's and don'ts for those who wish to submit an article to the journal. So without further ado, I would like to start with Geoff and ask the following question. Geoff, what is the scope of the journal? In particular, what kind of submissions should you send to IJRL and which submissions should you not? Moreover, what should you do to get your article published at the IJRL? So you have 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Milton. And thank you to all those who've shown up for this session. I started as editor-in-chief back in 2002. Still going, now co-editor-in-chief, and this is based on those years of experience. The starting point for me is always, whenever you're thinking about publishing, this is obviously for the IJRL, but could be any journal, what's the journal's title? It is the International Journal of Refugee Law, and every single one of those words matters. Apart from of, probably. So it's an international journal. We quite often get publications from people that focus on one single country and its practice. That's not bad in and of itself, because the international refugee law is developed at the domestic level. But what we'd like to see, and which helps sell the article to the editors-in-chief, is that it's set in its international context. So you might be writing about the law of Arcadia, but how does the law of Arcadia fit with the law of the rest of the world in this regard? How is it different? How does it move things on? Then it's a journal, okay? This means it's not a PhD chapter, which might seem strange for some of you doing PhDs, some of you at the early stage of your academic career. In a PhD, you're trying to write about, show to the examiners that you understand the topic in general. It's much more encyclopedic. This is a journal. It's a specialist journal. It's for refugee lawyers. They know the basics already. You're trying to write in this article about how the law can be moved on. What's wrong? Where are the gaps? What's new about what you're saying that other people have not said before? Because that's what journals do. They are regular publications that try and develop a particular field of law. And that particular field is refugee law, okay? So yes, it's much broader than just refugees. It's forcibly displaced persons in general and stateless persons too in certain cases. But we thought that the International Journal of Forcibly Displaced, Internally Displaced Refugees, Asylum Seekers, Returnees, and Stateless People was a bit long for a title of a journal, so we just went with refugee law. But it's got to be about refugee law. Who are refugees? We had an article in recently that went out for review, okay? But what came back was that this was really about people who were migrating generally. And there was very little reference to refugee law. Refugee law is a sub-discipline of international law. If you're writing for the IJRL, we expect there to be some connection with refugee law, okay, in what you're saying. And it might be that you're writing about how refugee law and migration law fit together, but there better be something on refugee law. And that brings me to the final topic, the final word, law. It's a law journal. This isn't a very narrow definition of law. Socio-legal is definitely law, but there's the Journal of Refugee Studies out there that looks more at social science approaches to forced displacement, humanities approaches. There are other journals that deal more generally with the international sort of relations aspects. This, if you're writing for us, International Journal of Refugee Law, remember those 4 words and you will be happy. The other thing you need to do to keep people like me happy is, first of all, go to the website and check out our rules for submission. They're not that long, but they're useful. And if we get something in the right format, trust me, it makes it easier for us to do a first read. And if we're happy that it meets the basic criteria, Professor J. McAdam or I will then send it out to reviewers. And I think for the moment, Milton, that's where I want to stop. Please use the Q&A if you have specific questions. We'll try and get round to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geoff. Now, continuing with, I think I would like to also remind that at the website, we have an introductory note for those who wish to submit to the journal first time. So we gave already written tips on what the reviewers and the editors expect, some basic information about the first-time authors. I would like to remind this. I will hopefully provide some links in the chat as well. So moving on, my second question relates to the editing and the review process. So as the co-editor-chief, we want to learn from you, how does the editor process works? Which articles are rejected outright, which are sent to peer reviewers, and which do not, basically? How the editors choose to send a manuscript to the peer review? And what are the criteria taken into consideration in this process? Thank you.
Well, assuming you have met the basic test of this is an article on international refugee law, what happens next? Dead easy. There is a desk review process. So Professor McAdam and I will look at what's submitted just to make certain it meets the basic criteria that I've just set out, that it's one that we would want. At that point, though, please remember it's the International Journal of Refugee Law. It's not the Geoff Gilbert Journal of Refugee Law or the J. McAdam Journal of Refugee Law. As long as we are happy it meets the basic criteria, we select 2 reviewers who will not know your name. It's double-blind peer review. You will never know the reviewers. They will never know you. They just get an anonymized version of your submission, which you will have supplied. And they get, hopefully, a month. Now, here I'm going to say something. First of all, you have to find reviewers who've got time and availability. I have spent 3 hours one Saturday morning simply trying to get reviewers. And I'd send stuff off, and within half an hour, the first reviewer I chose had said, sorry, not available. That happens, and sometimes it's not as quick as within half an hour. They take a week to tell you they're not available. So the sending it out is a part of the problem. You've got to find a reviewer who has the time and capacity. They then should give a review within a month. But as we all know, life happens. And sometimes they're not back within the month. They do get chased. It's automated. It's all done through a computer. You submit online. We get told online whether we've done our job properly. Once it comes back from the 2 reviewers, I get an email telling me, make a decision. It is very, very rare that there are 2 rejects, okay? Because we've already done the desk review before it goes out to reviewers. We've already decided this could be published. Once the reviewers come back, if they both say accept as is, that never happens. Trust me, it never happens. We would go accept as is, but we never get that. What will normally happen is you'll either get two sets of revisions, i.e., minor revisions, major revisions, something like that, or a reject and revisions. And they're the difficult ones. Because just because one person has said reject doesn't mean that we reject. We will look at the comments of both reviewers and make a decision based on whether we think it's rescuable, taking into account all the comments from both reviewers. It will then go back to you if we've said, yeah, would you like to revise? You then get time to revise. You then submit your revisions with a note on how you've answered all the reviewers' criticisms. We then send that back to one of the reviewers. Now, if one of them was a reject, trust me, they're the one who is going to get it second time round, because really, even in sending it out, we've ignored them. So we want to know that we've met their criticisms before we publish, because we wouldn't have chosen them as reviewers unless they knew what they were doing. So we really do trust our reviewers in the same way that we trust you to write something worthwhile in the first place. You've now done your revisions, it's gone back, lo and behold, they now say, yeah, accept. And at that point, it's accept. But there then is a delay because there's a queue for things to be published. Okay. And during that time, the law will change, undoubtedly. At some point, a copy-edited version of your article will be sent to you. You'll be asked to fix all the problems that the copy edit has picked up. You'll also have an opportunity to update within reason. It then comes back from you. It goes out to the publishers, Oxford University Press. They send you proofs. You can only fix mistakes in the proofs. You can't do any new stuff. So at some point you will write, the law is accurate up until, and then it comes back and we can publish online immediately. The paper version could take another 6 months, but you can go online once we've got back the corrected proofs. That's the process. It's mechanical at the end, but the first part is very much an academic sort of engagement between anonymous reviewers, anonymous author, with the editor sitting in the middle and trying to make sense of it and trying to assist the author to get their article into print. Meltem, I think that's possibly enough, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Geoff. Just one very interesting point when you were talking, I see as a key point as well. So when you receive an article, for instance, on a certain particular topic, I suspect you find someone who is an expert on it. So if the authors missed, for instance, a leading expert in their field or forget to cite him or her, or they already cited someone a lot in their papers, that could be one of the considerations when assigning a reviewer, right? Can you just mystify this thing? Like when you're choosing a reviewer, how do you look for expertise?
Right. Finding expert reviewers in a field as constrained as international refugee law isn't difficult. The question is finding ones who are available. We know who the leading authors are in this field. We've been around, Jane and I have been around for a very long time doing this. So we do have a list in our heads when an article comes in. X could review that. Okay, Y could review that. I have to say that quite often articles will come in that don't cite me, okay? And that damages my ego badly, okay? But it's irrelevant. As I said before, it's not the Geoff Gilbert Journal of Refugee Law. It's the International Journal of Refugee Law. I have on one occasion, and one occasion only, suggested to an author that they might like to read a particular collection of essays in a book, one of which would have included me. And they still failed to cite me when it came back after all the revisions they'd made. That wasn't the issue. They still got published. Some reviewers are slightly less sort of reticent about naming themselves, and they will list, here are all the articles you should have included, which you forgot. It's irrelevant in the end. What's important is that you have covered the jurisprudence and the analysis in such a way that this is going to take the argument forward. And if you think that you didn't need to cite me, as long as you've dealt with all the issues, that's it. I don't care. Okay, my job is to make certain that the published article takes the discussion further than it's gone before. And that's all that matters. So whether you've cited X or Y should be irrelevant. Whether you've missed arguments, that's really important.
Right. Thank you very much. That was quite useful. I think a good literature review is a key to article being accepted. Moving on now, we have Dr. Marina Sharpe, who is one of the editorial board members of the journal. And as a peer reviewer, my question to Marina is this. What do you look for in manuscripts that you receive? What are do's and don'ts for first-time authors? What do you think a good article or manuscript is? Thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Melton, for the question, and thank you for inviting me to be here. It's a real pleasure to participate in what I think is a really important event. I have 4 main points in response to your question. First, I want to talk a little bit about the perspective the reviewer is coming at this from, as opposed to the editor-in-chief who does the desk review. And then I'll talk about the things reviewers look for. Then I'll briefly touch on the range of possible responses a reviewer will give, which Geoff has already introduced, and finally, how you should respond to your review. So, starting with the perspective the reviewer is coming from, the key point, and it's obvious, but it bears mentioning, is that the peer reviewer is, of course, seeing the paper after it has passed an initial screening, that being the desk review done by one of the editors-in-chief, which Geoff just talked about. But they're also seeing it as an expert in that field, or at least someone more knowledgeable in relation to the paper's topic than perhaps the editor-in-chief was. So their review will be informed by that. So for example, one thing the editor-in-chief might look for in their initial desk review is, is this original and interesting? And they might think, yes, it is. But when it comes to a peer reviewer who's much, much closer to that topic and probably more familiar with the literature in that specific area, the reviewer might have a different opinion. So it's possible that there could even be some quite basic issues that come up at the peer review stage as a function of how close the peer reviewer is to the topic under consideration. So all that's just to say that the peer reviewer may revisit some of the basic criteria that will have already been addressed at the desk review stage, but they may come up again. Assuming that none of those basic criteria do come up again, that brings me to my second point, which is the real substantive, more nitty-gritty things that the reviewer looks for. And I have a few of those. A big one is, of course, originality. The purpose of a scholarly journal is to push the boundaries of a field and to help a field grow and develop. So we're not going to publish something that just summarizes things we already know. So when we say we're looking in peer review for originality, that's what we mean. Your article can't just be a summary, and the way that might end up happening is if a master's student, for example, submits a paper they wrote for their course or their master's thesis, it might end up that there's not a huge amount of originality there. And originality doesn't mean that the paper has to be like a breakthrough. There are ways to add value, make a contribution without without doing something totally revolutionary. But it's really that value add that we're looking for. At the same time, and it's kind of two sides of the same coin, the reviewer is also looking for engagement with existing literature. It's very difficult to be original if you haven't engaged with the existing literature, because to be original and to develop the field, you have to know what the field already consists of, what's already there. So we'll want to see that the article has properly engaged with and reflected all the main or leading literature that already exists for the topic that the article is about. And if that has happened only partially, that's an area where, you know, it's not a rejection. It's just the reviewer will make some suggestions. If the article has completely failed to engage with the existing literature, that would probably be be a reason that you might reject. The reviewer is not looking for the article to be perfect. An article rarely is perfect on the first time around. But what we're looking for is potential, and the evidence in the article that, you know, if the reviewer makes some suggestions, the author will be able to handle them and improve it. The third main thing a reviewer would be looking for is an argument. So it should go without saying, but again, it's worth mentioning that an article must have an argument. If you're just summarizing, there's no argument there. So first of all, is there an argument? Second of all, is the argument well made? And this is linked to the structure of the article, which I'll get to in a second. It's very hard to make an argument effectively if the paper isn't coherently structured. And is the argument substantiated? It's not enough to just make an argument, you have to then make out the argument. So has the author marshaled facts, law, and analysis effectively in support of their argument? We're also looking for good structure. So we need to be able to identify your argument, and that's a function of structure. We always want to know kind of where you're going, and that's where a good introduction is really, really important. Your introduction should clearly lay out what is your argument and how are you going to make it out. So the introduction should include a roadmap to the whole paper or a summary to the whole paper. Good structure, in a way, a good structure is holding the hand of the reader and making it easy for them to follow your argument and the points you're trying to make. We would also be looking for accuracy. So any law that the paper is analyzing, has that been done correctly and accurately? If the paper marshals facts, are those facts correct? It seems basic. I have reviewed papers where the legal analysis was just wrong, and that would again be that's very rare. But when that happens, that would be, you would probably reject it. So accuracy, and finally the writing style. So the paper has to be readable. It shouldn't be, the reader shouldn't have to work really hard to understand what you're saying. There should be flow to the writing, and this is difficult to achieve the first time, which is why I really suggest that writers revise their draft multiple times, and also share it with friends or supervisors or colleagues to get feedback. So those are basically the things the reviewer is looking for. I'll just recap: originality, engagement with existing literature, argument, structure, accuracy of legal analysis and facts, and good writing. I won't spend too much time on the range of possible peer reviewer responses because Geoff has already touched on it. But basically, as a result of the peer reviewers' take on the 6 points I've just outlined, the 6 things they're looking for, they will either accept, which, as Geoff said, is rare, accept with minor revisions, revise and resubmit, or reject. And again, as Geoff said, there's 2 reviewers, and they will rarely pick the same things. So then there's a bit of a dance that the editors-in-chief have to do to make a decision based on 2 probably not the same possible responses from the peer reviewers. If the response is either accept with minor revisions or revise and resubmit, what that means is the author has to go back to work on the paper and has to respond to the review. So I just want to spend what remains of my time to provide some suggestions about how you might do that. Now, if you get a revise and resubmit, also known as major revisions, when you receive that email and read the peer reviews, you will probably have lots of feelings. Everyone has been there. It happens to everyone, and it's totally normal. You need to manage those feelings so that your response to the further work you do on the paper is kind of disconnected from those feelings. Usually when you submit an article to a journal, it represents the culmination of an enormous amount of work for you, possibly years. It's very normal that a peer-reviewed journal article could have taken you 2 years to prepare. And so if you get a revise and resubmit with a lot of comments, that can be quite demoralizing. You have to get from the place of being demoralized to seeing the value of the peer review. And the best way to do that is to read the reviews and then to wait a few days and digest them slowly, because right away you might have a reaction of like resistance against the comments. But usually what happens is if you wait, you'll see that the reviewer was probably right. And so you need to give yourself that emotional distance before you re-engage with the paper. And then as you revise your paper, having waited a few days, you'll probably come to see the wisdom of a lot of the peer reviewers' comments, and you'll end up being really, really grateful for the opportunity to get that feedback and revise your paper. That said, you do not have to take all the comments. It is your work, and you should always, you're the author. And I'll get to that in a second. But one thing I do want to say first about the value of the peer review process is that now I'm at a stage in my career where I'm working on a book, and so I'm not getting that peer review, and I really, really can see what a gift it is, and that's really the way you should think about it. When you're working on a book, unless you publish a chapter in a different form as an article, which you shouldn't do for every chapter, you're going to end up with, if you have received a book contract on the basis of a proposal, but not on the basis of a full manuscript, what ends up happening is that some of your chapters will not have been through peer review, and that is scary. The only thing scarier than peer review is publishing without peer review. So please keep that in mind and really engage with peer review in a way that so that you can see and accept the really generous process that it is. Now, I mentioned that you don't have to take all the comments. How do you handle that? This is really important. Different people have different ways of doing it. There's two main approaches. Some people make a table where you basically cut and paste the reviewer. You have a table for review 1, a table for review 2, and you cut and paste the reviewer's comments into that table. And then you have a column with, explaining how you have responded to those comments. And that way you're kind of itemizing the comments and comment by comment going through and saying how you've responded. And so the editors will see that in the table. The editors-in-chief will see that in the table. You will also resubmit 2 versions of your article. At least this is how I like to do it: a tracked changes version and a clean version. So by having the table on one side of their screen and the track changes article on the other side of their screen, the editors-in-chief can really track that you've responded to all the comments. And for ones where you don't make changes to the paper, you just note in your table why. Okay, if you're not going to take a comment, you have to explain that. Another way to do it is just with colors. So assuming you've been able to receive the peer review in a Word document, or perhaps cut and paste it into a Word document, you can go through it and respond next to the comment in a different color font. Whatever method you use, the bottom line is that your objective is to make it as easy as possible for the editor-in-chief to see that you have that you have thought about each comment and responded to each comment, even if your response is to say, actually, I'm not going to take this comment, and this is why. So use like formatting is your friend, and use it in a way that makes the editor-in-chief's life easier. That's going to make them have happy feelings when they're looking at your resubmitted paper, and you want them. That's good for you.
Thank you,
so,
Marina.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm out of time, and actually that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot. I think you gave us a very key things when submitting, but also when revising the article. And thanks so much. Now I'm moving on to Kirsten. She's one of the book review editors of the journal. So my question to you is, what makes a good manuscript book review for the journal? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Malcolm, and thanks everyone who's come along. I wanted to say a bit about book reviews as another way to engage with the journal. And I edit the book review section with Dalal Stevens at the University of Warwick, so we do this together. And the first thing to say, for a book review section, we need reviewers, and we also need books to review. And we would like both of those to be representative of the global community of international refugee law scholars. We want our reviews to be objective. So we generally don't accept unsolicited reviews. If somebody was to write a review and send it to us, we probably wouldn't publish. But what we do want are suggestions of people who would like to review a book in the journal, and suggestions of books that you think are interesting potentially for the readers of the journal. And hopefully we can then match reviewers and books and produce good reviews of interesting new publications. So anyone who is interested in possibly reviewing a book for the journal, please feel free to email me or to Dalal Stevens if you think you'd like to have a go. As for what makes a good review, well, as Geoff said, it has to be about international refugee law. And there are other books that may be about refugee studies more generally that might not be suitable for the IJRL. The reviews, we need our reviews to be objective. So as I've said, that means we don't want any conflict of interest between the reviewer and the author of the publication. So supervisory relationships, colleagues, people you write together with, those wouldn't be suitable review relationships. There'd be a conflict of interest there. But where there's an objective, where there's no other kind of close relationship, that would be okay. The review space that we have is relatively limited. So a review we can publish reviews at around 1,000 to 1,500 words, which is quite short if you're trying to give an overview of a book, particularly some of the larger disciplinary handbooks that these days might have 50 or 60 chapters. So we have quite a small space. And what we want is for authors to give us, or the reviewer to give us, a fair and balanced assessment of the book. And that means that what we want to do is profile books that are good new contributions to the field, interesting for the readership. If you were to receive a book for review and you felt that it really wasn't very good, rather than a very very critical review, we would be more likely to say it's just not suitable to review in the journal if it's deeply flawed. That doesn't mean that everything you say about a book needs to be positive. Of course, we want a critical analysis, a critical evaluation of the book, but we want that to be fair and balanced, and ultimately that we're profiling books that we think are worth reading. And I think those are the kind of main areas that we want to see in a review. But the most important thing, and the point I really want to emphasize, is that if you agree to review a book for us for the journal, please deliver the review. As Geoff said, with peer reviews, it's increasingly difficult to both find people who have the time and capacity to review, which of course we fully understand the commitment and the contribution people are making to the journal. But those who commit to do it, please do deliver, because it's really can become a big disappointment when a reviewer has agreed to review a book and then maybe it's delayed for months and quite a long time, and by the time they eventually don't submit the review, too much time may have passed after publication, and the result can be that a book doesn't get reviewed in the journal at all. So I think the key point is that if you do agree to do a review, please do deliver it, because it really could end up impacting on the author of the book, who may not get their work reviewed and obviously miss that opportunity to have it brought to the readership. So I think those are the main things I wanted to emphasize. We really want to find new reviewers. We're always interested to hear about new books in an area that you think may be relevant to the IJRL. We really want to expand the reach of our reviewers and to bring people into the journal. And we're very happy to work with people who would want to review to improve your review or make sure that it's a good standard. It needs to be around 1,000 to 1,500 words, objective, fair, even-handed, and delivered on time. So those are the key points for the reviews. And as I said, please feel free to email if anyone would like to volunteer.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Now I have some key questions to all the speakers, and I would like, and since we have limited time, I will keep it limited to 2 tips. I am asking for tips for those who wish to submit to the IJRL. What would be the best 2 tips you wish to give our audience? I will start with Geoff, then move to Marina and Kirsten. Geoff.
First of all, don't be constrained or worried that you are not good enough to write for the IJRL. Okay, that's the first thing. I'm going to share my screen very briefly, given that I can actually manage to do this, because there we go. Share. That is the list of countries where people have submitted from to the IJRL over the past 5 years. Yes, you're going to see the usual suspects of Australia, Canada, the UK, the US, but look at all the others. We have got probably the broadest range of countries from where authors are submitting of the entire OUP collection of journals. So don't worry about I'm not good enough. That's never going to get you published. You might get feedback that says no, but you'll get feedback. We never give no feedback. Second tip, read the instructions to authors, which Melton has already posted in the chat, so that it comes to us in a format where we're looking at it and going, yep, I can see why how this has been written. It looks good. And I'm going to have a third tip. Follow Marina's advice. Get as much review before you submit it to us as you possibly can. Share it with colleagues. Share it with friends. So get it into a format where people other than you understand what you are writing about. The problem with journal articles is they are your children. You sort of associate yourself with them so closely, and you know them so well. and you don't explain it clearly enough for the rest of us as to why we should love your children. Okay, use peer review for that. That was 3. I apologize, too long, I'll shut up.
That is more than welcome. Thank you, Geoff. And next up, Marina.
Yeah, I feel like I already gave my tips in when I gave you that giant information dump before. So I guess I'll just probably pass it on. Yeah, I agree with all Geoff's tips, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Kirsten. You can also mention it for you are a reviewer as well, not just book editor. So just feel free to also include article reviews in that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was going to talk more generally about article writing, but I think one tip, which I often don't do myself, so do as I say, not as I do, but don't leave the abstract until last. The abstract is a really important part of your journal article. And often the work and the revision and the focus is on redrafting and revising your article, and then the abstract can become something that's written quite hastily towards the end. And in fact, that's the thing that people are most likely to read, and from that decide whether they want to read the full article. So the abstract's really important, and give it appropriate time. And I think I agreed with lots of things Marina said about structure and the use of structure. So maybe my other tip will be 2 contradictory pieces of advice in classic peer reviewer fashion. I would say one piece of advice is get your work out the door, get your work done, get it into, get it out into circulation, but don't do it too quickly. And that's where I want to echo Geoff and what Marina has said. Make your work as good as you can before you submit it to a journal and into the peer review process. But don't let some fear of perfectionism stop you from ever being willing to just let go and get it out and get that review. So yeah, the challenge is knowing where the kind of happy balance is between getting it out and making it as good as you can, but that's the balance you're aiming for.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. And if I may, I also have 2 tips, because I think I'm only the person non-native in this as part of the panel. So for those of you whose first language is not English, I would advise you to have, if possible, proofread your article before sending it, but this is not a must. So, but also have your friends or colleagues look at it. If you are an early scholar from developing countries, you may not have access to all the articles. We know the problems as well. So try to have someone from your circle, from your faculty, from your discipline, read it before you send it to us. The second, have a good lit review. If you're missing a key person, which is very relevant to your argument, that is a no for the article, and it gives you a very negative impression for the reviewers. I see a lot of articles which has potential, but they kind of not include a key scholar who might made a similar argument, and this is a very don't situation for me. I'm sure perhaps that's the also Marina touched upon. Do a good lit review, include persons who are relevant to your arguments. This is one of the key issues. If you miss someone who has a very similar article to you and claim that argument is original, but we know for a fact that because the reviewers are experts on the topic, they know the literature, that someone who has written 20 years ago. So if you miss that key person, not necessarily a very new article, we know this is missing a very foundational step. And finally, don't lose hope. If you get a rejection, if you get a revise and resubmit, especially if you are in the beginning of your career, I can say I got a lot of rejections when I first started submitting. Persevere, do not give up, and try to take comments in, as Marina mentioned, because they're coming from a good place for you to improve your article. Try to improve your article. You may submit somewhere else, or if you have revised and resubmit, you may come back to us. But try to take into consideration that these comments are actually good for you and for you to improve what's missing. And finally, I know this because I'm a Turkish scholar. I know from the fact that Jose was in the chat. He's an editorial board member from Latin America. We have law systems which are more descriptive than argumentative. And we write in style in master's thesis, PhD thesis, the historical development, the terminology take up chapters and chapters. But if you're submitting for IJRL, try to be more argumentative. Try to have a certain argument that has not been said before and elaborate on this. And this is quite important because in some systems, you don't have that kind of legal writing. And this may actually be a rejection reason because we might say your article is very descriptive and you might have a very good idea, but try to elaborate your argument from the earlier chapters and earlier sections. And this is one of the key things I learned throughout my own personal academic journey. And sorry if I kind of spoke a lot, but I see Geoff has a hand, so I will give the floor to him and then we will go on with the questions. Thank you. Geoff.
Just to pick up on one thing you said there, Melton, about non-mother tongue English speakers. Please don't let that put you off. Please don't think we ever reject because the English isn't good enough. Trust me, we fix the English of people for whom English is their mother tongue. Do not ever let that hold you back. We even have a support process within the journal. If we see an article has come in from someone who's not been through the global North education system, which trains you to write these articles, we will work with you if we think your idea is really good and we want to see it published, to give you support from one of the editorial team before you submit it for review, because we recognize that global North publications tend to publish articles by global North writers, and that cannot be appropriate for the International Journal of Refugee Law. The other thing I want to say is a response to a question by Emily Arnold Fernandez, who in the chat, what do I always send stuff out to the expert if the expert has been disagreed with? No, of course I don't. I choose a reviewer who I think will give a fair review. This has led to one expert striking me off their Christmas card list, but I do not care because I wanted someone who could review the article, not the expert to say, oh, you've got it wrong because you disagree with me. That's not the approach of choosing reviewers.
Right, thank you very much. So I'm now going through the questions and answers. So I will pose the question, and if it's to a certain speaker, I would elaborate, but if it's a general, just please feel free to answer. So Gurme Kapoor asks the main basic criteria during desk review, and this is the Geoff. So Geoff, you have already mentioned this, but do you have 2-3 basic criteria for desk review?
Yeah, does it meet the basic criteria I listed at the beginning? Is it about international refugee law, and is it the sort of thing that is a journal article, something that moves the debate forward? Beyond that, probably nothing. Okay, it's everything that Marina then went on to discuss in much fuller detail about. Does it deal with the existing literature? Has it been properly structured, properly developed? But to a certain extent, given it's met most of those criteria, I'll send it out for review rather than reject it myself. I do not feel it is my job to do a reject. What I feel it is my job to do is to make certain this is an article we could publish in the International Journal of Refugee Law, and that I'm not wasting a reviewer's time by just sending something that could never, because of quality purposes, be accepted. But it's not my job to say, how far does this move the argument forward? Is there sufficient here for me to want it to be published? I'm looking for the reviewers to give me the guidance on that. That's why we choose expert reviewers.
Right, thank you very much. So I think the next question is for you as well, Geoff. How do you, so Emily asked, how do you handle reviews where an author disagrees with an expert in the field? Do you ask
That's what I just answered to her.
Yes.
That was the question I just answered about not you. I've been struck off a Christmas card list because I didn't choose the expert.
Okay, I mean, as long as you make sense and give good reason,
Yeah.
I think that's quite reasonable to actually disagree with the commenters. Thank you. So Laura's question, sorry, on the international nature of the IJRL, would also, regional regimes of refugee protection would also qualify. Yes.
For certain. International is just shorthand for international, regional, comparative even. So we've had an article recently that compared the approach in 3 different countries with 3 different from 3 different legal families as well. So what was interesting there was to see how civil law, common law, and Islamic law countries deal with the same issue. Okay, so yeah, no, international just means you're not just focusing on one legal system and its approach. Jane and I reject quite regularly articles that focus on just one country and its refugee status determination procedure, because it's interesting for that country, but not for anywhere else.
Yes, and I think this question is for Kirsten. Do you select the books for reviews, or could writers select them? So this question is to Kirsten.
Yeah, we usually, so you're welcome to contact us and suggest books for review, and possibly suggest that you would be interested in reviewing a book. What we don't want are people who have written a review in advance and then send it to us. We usually prefer to independently match a reviewer with a book. So if a reviewer gets in touch and says they're particularly interested in reviewing a new publication, we will consider it. And if there's no conflict of interest and if they seem like a suitable reviewer, then we might go with that. But usually it's a kind of case-by-case decision. And usually we prefer to have books for review and a list of people who are willing to review, and then to kind of make the editorial decision to match them. But feel free to get in touch, Arjumand, if that's the questioner. Feel free to get in touch if you have books that you think we should be reviewing in the IJRL. It's always good to know that we're on top of what's coming out.
Right, thank you very much. I think we have some questions about the publication time. Geoff answered this saying to 1 year to 1 year and a half. And Jessica asked if this can be, so Sérgio asked the time limit, and Jessica asked if this can be shortened in the near future. I guess this might not be the case, but Geoff, do you want to elaborate on the process?
Okay. So first of all, we've got to find reviewers. We've got to find reviewers who then give a timely review. It then got to have time for Jane or I to make a decision as to what we do with those reviews. It then goes back to the author, and quite frequently, okay, the reviewer then needs a bit more time than is given by the machine, given by the computer. So we're already probably talking about 4 to 5 months before the author sent in their revised version. Okay, so from initial submission to actually getting it back, 5 months is not normal. So already we're at 5 months. Then at that base, it does speed up a bit from our process. So maybe 6 weeks between then and a final decision as to whether we will publish. So we're at 6.5 months already. But at 6.5 months, it's got to be copy edited. It's got to go to Oxford University Press. You've got to get proofs. You've got to have those proofs checked. So the time it will take to actually get a version that could go online is probably at minimum 12 months from when you first submitted. And that's got nothing to do with being slow. That's got everything to do with you needed to take time, we needed to take time to come to the right decision. The problem with That stage, though, and the delay between 12 and 18 months is we only publish 4 times a year. You're in a queue. There are several, we get more articles than we can publish. Okay. So even once we've hit the proof stage, and at that point it can go online, so it's available and all the rest of it, and we do that all the time, it will possibly take another 6 months before it appears in print in the actual physical journal. But online, it's probably about 12 months.
Right, thank you very much. We have a question about originality. Shall I ask this to Marina, perhaps? Marina Arjuman asks, is originality required more conceptually or empirically will be acceptable? Would you have a comment to that? Yes.
Yeah, I think new empirical data would count as original. So there's many different ways to be original. So yes, empirical originality counts.
Right, thank you. Also, I would like to, I just included in the chat the link for OUP's Developing Country Initiative. So for some countries, developing and least developed countries, there's a list. If you are a scholar from the institutions in those countries, you might have free access to the journal. Please take a look. If you do not have access to the IJRL or any other sources, take a look at the list, please. And if you're included, you may contact the publisher to get free access to the journal. I think access issues might actually solve a few problems due to less representation of some countries in the journal. So I cannot see any other actually questions in the chat. Do you have any, do you want from the speakers, would you like to ask any other questions? And just when you're considering that, I might have some final remarks because I think we have just a few minutes. So if you have any final remarks, Geoff, Marina, and Kirsten, please, the floor is yours. So Geoff, do you have any final remarks?
Be ambitious, try for it. I'll tell you now that one of the best articles I have ever written was rejected 6 times before it actually got published. Never give up.
Thank you very much. Actually, my first submission to the IJRL was rejected, so I can tell that the process is hard and long, but in the end, you will get there. Thank you, Geoff. And Marina, next up, do you have any final remarks?
Yeah, I just want to echo the point Kirsten made, which I thought was a really good point about striking a balance between letting your own perfectionism and fear kind of paralyze you, but also sending things out too soon. So I think everyone struggles with that balance. I thought that was a great point. And I think it's something you get better at over time. Eventually, with experience, you develop an intuitive sense of when something should go out, and before then, you can always ask for advice about if something's ready. Show it to a peer. Thanks.
Thank you, Marina. And Kirsten?
No further advice really, but just to encourage people again, if you're interested in reviewing books, to contact me or Dalal and kind of open a conversation about books and a representative book review section.
Well, thank you very much for this amazing conversation. I would like to thank our speakers, but also the audience for joining us today. So hopefully we will improve submissions to the journal from less represented countries. But if you have any questions, please also, you can send us your questions as well. Thanks so much for participating and being us with here today. So goodbye and thank you from the editorial team. Bye.